Morning.
Good morning, yes. For those of you who woke up so early to be here on a Saturday, thank you so much. If it wasn't my own presentation, I would not be here. So I'm amazed that all of you are here.
Okay, let me introduce the first presenter. This is our Sierra, and she's going to talk about, you see, about what?
About
Trivial things.
in American politics.
Yes. Oh, yes.
And of course.
So, there we are. So now we know the topic, you know who I am. Now we can start. Okay. So, why are hats important? Why are hats important? Does anyone know?
Brains need some kind of cover.
Yes, you need to cover your brains. No, actually, so it's a fashion statement, right? It's important if you're going to lead a nation, you should be able to dress yourself, right? And then B, as every Russian knows, hats keep you from getting sick, right? How many times have you left the house and it's plus 12 and your grandmother's been like, oh, wait, where's your hat? And you're like, oh my God, it's fine, right? So hats are important both for, fashion, present, looking nice, and then also just functionality, right? So to start off my presentation, I thought I'd tell you a story about the 9th President of the United States. His name is William Henry Harrison. Okay, he was this is the dates that he was president for. How long was he president of the United States of America? 1 month. Why 1 month? What do you think happened?
Perhaps he died and he was re-elected.
He died. Oh, he died. Yes, he died. So, what is he wearing in this photo? Some sort of weird coat, but no hat. So, he was 68 years old when he was elected. Oh, come on. He was 68 years old when he was elected president, right, in 1841. In 1841, that's really old for someone in 1841. Normally people didn't live that long, right? And so when he was elected, there were some concerns about his health. Will he be strong enough to be an effective president, right? And so, in order to prove everyone that yes, indeed, he was a strong, manly man at 68 years old, he decided to go to his inaugurational speech in March, a very cold March day, without a coat and without a hat, to prove to everyone that he was healthy and strong. So, he had the longest speech in history. It was over 2 hours. And also, doing the other things that one does while becoming president, so meeting with people, being in a parade, all of that without a coat and a hat. So guess what happened?
It cost him his life.
2 weeks later, he caught a cold, right? And the cold turned into pneumonia, and he died. Hello. So, some people say, hello. Some people say that maybe it wasn't exactly not wearing a hat and a coat, because he did catch a cold about 2 or 3 weeks later. So maybe it wasn't related, some historians do say. But I like to think and remind you all that if you don't wear a hat, you will die, as this man demonstrated. There you go. I've only lived in Russia for a year, but I'm already turning into a bomber. Okay, so the next famous hat is Abraham Lincoln, okay? So his hat is called a stovepipe hat. It is essentially a type of top hat, okay? It was really, really quite tall, right? So it was 7 inches by 10 inches, right? So that's in centimeters, 17.78 centimeters, right? It was a big hat, okay? Yeah, this thing was huge, right? And so Abraham Lincoln was already a tall man, okay? He was 6'4", which I think in centimeters is like 194, 193, someone who's good at math? Yes? Sure. Okay, so somewhere around there. So he's already quite tall, right? With that hat, he was around 200 centimeters. So everyone knew where he was at all times. And I'm sure he did this on purpose, right? He is the President of the United States. He wants to be easily recognized. Also, what happened during his presidency?
He was killed in the theater, he was shot.
He was, and we'll get to that in a second. He was shot. He also was president during the Civil War. Yes? We all know that, remember that? Yeah. So he wanted to be sort of a recognizable figure, right? A sort of unifying figure in the midst of this Civil War, right? Some interesting facts about Abraham Lincoln and his stovepipe hat. It was famously battered. Do you know what battered means? It was famously very like worn and punched in. So it was like, kind of looked like this on the top, right? So not a very nice looking, clean hat. And people were like, why, if he's the President of the United States, does his hat look like he's stamped on it, right? But he actually did it on purpose because Abraham Lincoln wanted to be known as sort of a common man, right? As an everyday man of the people. And so top hats were quite expensive, right? You needed to own one because they were mandatory for formal occasions. But they're expensive. Most people could only afford one, maybe in their life, etc. And so even though he could afford new ones and nice ones being the president, he wanted to show that he was just like everybody else, that his hat got old and dirty as well. And just like everyone else, he didn't buy a new one every year, right? So it was done on purpose. All right, in addition, some other fun facts about his hat. So he used to carry important papers and documents in his hat. So he would take it, you'd roll it up, and you'd just put it on the inside of his hat. Put it on his head. Right? He didn't carry a briefcase, he carried a hat instead. Also, it was good because during the wartime, any secret documents would be literally on his body. So it was kept things safer. Although it didn't always keep him safe, this hat of his, because if he is 200 centimeters tall with this hat, it's the middle of a war, right? People know where he is, obviously. There are a few instances where he was almost shot because of the hat. One of those, he was riding kind of near-ish the White House, nearby, and a would-be assassin, someone that tried to kill him but didn't succeed, shot at him while he rode by, and it hit his hat and knocked it off. So he was fine, picked up his hat, and kept going. In another time, during the war, he was visiting a fort. And he was, looking at the soldiers there and things, and it wasn't very far away from the Confederate soldiers, and so he's kind of looking at the soldiers. And his advisors kept being like, take your hat off. You're literally on the fort walls, looking at enemy soldiers. What are you doing? Like, you're wearing a giant black hat that everyone knows it's your hat. He's like, it's fine, it's fine. Eventually, though, the soldiers saw his hat and started rapidly trying to fire at him. So then, of course, he had to take his hat off and go away, right? Because if you're wearing a giant black hat, people know who you are. All right, so this hat has 2 black bands. You can't see it very well in this photo, but it has 2 black hat bands. So this is called a hat band, right? This ribbon here. Okay, so he has 2 of them. One is your standard hat band, so it's going to be about this thickness, maybe a little bit smaller, right? And the other one is very small, very thin, and it's a black ribbon, right? And black ribbons, what do those normally signify?
Mourning.
Mourning. So it's a mourning ribbon. His 3-year-old son died of typhoid fever, right, in 1862 or 1863, somewhere around there. And he was so upset about it that he tied a black band on his hat and wore it ever since because of the loss of his son. His son's name was William. He called him Willie. It was his beloved little son. And the hat, he wore the same hat on the night that he was assassinated in the theater. And it was sitting right next to him. And that hat is in the Smithsonian Museum in the United States. And if you look at the hat, it has both bands on it. So to this day, Abraham Lincoln's hat is still in mourning for the loss of his son, many, many years after his death. So there you are. All right. So let's talk a little bit. So I said the stovepipe is essentially just a taller top hat. What is a top hat? This thing. All right. So the top hat, by the mid-18th century, it was the preferred dress hat. If you had a formal occasion you needed to go to, and you were a man, that's important, you were a man, you wore a top hat, okay? So, normally, up until the start of the 1900s, they were beaver, and we'll get to that later. By the 1900s, they started to be silk, right? The top hat signifies wealth and being the upper part of society. Even though you had to have it for formal occasions, right? That's why it was very expensive. Was because it was necessary for formal occasion, but it was also to show people that you had money. So it was sort of difficult if you were a common person trying to be in politics, right? Because they were expensive. Up until 1953, all presidents wore the top hat to the presidential inauguration. Everyone know what an inauguration is? All right. Okay, look at this thing.
Beaver.
It's a beaver. They're so cute. I love beavers. Okay, so most top hats were made by beaver felt, which I've said. However, by the start of the 1900s, they were made with silk. All right, so felt. So when people think fur, they think like fluffy, you know. Felt is actually something similar to one of like this hat, right? So they take the fur, and I don't know how they process it, but they create kind of a fabric that's like this. So not actually fur, it's not fluffy, it's kind of this. This is actual beaver fur, by the way, so if you want to, you can, don't hurt it, but if you'd like to look and touch my hat, you can. It's my favorite, most prized hat, so be careful. All right. So, they were made by silk in the 1900s, like I said. Right now, there is no, the type of silk that they made with the felt, they don't make anymore, actually. They stopped making it in the 60s because there wasn't enough of a demand. A lot of the silk that you made the felt for came from France, which caused problems after World War II, but we will get there. All right. Okay, another important presidential figure. Who is this, Luke?
Oh, I don't know, but I think he looks sort of like a teddy bear.
He looks like a teddy bear, so therefore he is...
Roosevelt.
Theodore Roosevelt. Yes, indeed. Who the teddy bear is named after. Did you guys know that?
Do you know what a teddy bear is?
Yes, do we know what a teddy bear is? It's a small stuffed animal bear that children have. Yes, a little toy. So, he, right, is our most, remembered probably as our most manly president, right? He was incredibly tough. He was in the Rough Riders, right, which is like this tough cavalry group, okay? And he wore his slope hat during the Spanish-American War, which started April 1898 to August 1898. So he fought, right, the Spanish-American War. Okay, so what is a slope hat? This is essentially the closest that I have to a slope hat, right? So it's for military people who are in hot climates, right? Because it keeps the sun off your face. You can put both up, you can put one up, right? And so oftentimes he's photographed in this hat. He wanted to sort of portray the fact that he was, you know, served in the military, tough, horseback kind of man, right? And we often remember him in this hat. imagine that the top hat was what people wore at their inauguration until 1953. This guy changed everything, right? So, does anyone know what kind of hat this is? If you do, I'll be impressed. It is a Homburg hat. But yes, it is felt. It's wool. His was wool felt. So the Homburg hat is not a top hat, as you can see, right? So it's a felt hat. This part's, a little bit tall, but not very tall. It's got a traditional Homburg hat has one dent in the middle. Okay. The closest thing I have to a Homburg, I don't own a Homburg, unfortunately. I've been looking for one, but I haven't found it. So is this, right? So imagine if these sides weren't pushed in, almost. This part is, and if this part was just a little bit taller, it would essentially be a Homburg hat. Okay, so he wore this to his inauguration. So he broke with tradition, which is understandable, but why? Why?
It looks more casual.
It looks more casual, yeah, so it looks a little bit more casual. Okay, the Homburg by the 1950s was still considered a dressy hat, but not a formal hat. Right, so dressy, but not formal, right? And so he wore it to his inauguration and surprised a lot of people by making that decision. This hat is also very, very popular with American gangsters, right? It's also known as the gangster hat, right? Like you see photos of Al Capone, etc., they're wearing a Homburg hat, right? And so what else? So what else is Eisenhower known for? He was president. He was also
In the war?
in the war. What war? Second World War. Was he a normal soldier?
Oh, he
No.
was a very important man.
Yes, he was like the leading general,
5-star.
5-star general of World War II, right? And so he was a tough man, okay? He was the leader of the army in World War II, and so he picked a hat that was a little bit tougher, right? Because if gangsters wear it, he's making a symbol of, I am a tough, strict man. He's not afraid to break with tradition, and he's also not afraid to be very, strong like a gangster, right? Perhaps. Also, though, to be fair, top hats and hats in general were starting to be out of fashion already by this point. You see a general decline in wearing hats throughout America. All sorts of hats, top hats, fedoras, Homburgs. You start to see, slowly but surely, the popularity of hats starts to decline. All right. Okay. So here is perhaps our most handsome president. Not perhaps, he's our most handsome president. Who is this? Kennedy. Yep. So people like to blame Kennedy on the death of the hat. In fact, there's an entire book written about whether or not Kennedy killed the hat. The reason why people say that it's Kennedy's fault that hats are no longer popular in the United States is because during his inaugurational address, he did not wear a hat. Which, if you actually look into the research, is not quite true. So this traditional top hat, he brought it to his address. He wore it while he was getting out of the car. He wore it while he was walking up to the podium. He wore it while he was sitting at the podium, waiting for people to introduce him, talk, say the prayer, etc. And then, right when he got up to speak, he took the hat off. So the only thing he did was just not talk with the hat on. Right? Other than that, he wore the hat. He did wear it. Okay, and why did he wear it? So if we rewind a little bit, I said that the hat was declining in popularity. And this made the hat makers very upset. Because hats were such an important part of the male wardrobe, you couldn't leave the house without some sort of a hat. it was a very big business.
And very often they are expensive.
And they were expensive, exactly. And it took a lot of skill to be able to make these hats. And so you had a bunch of highly skilled, trained people used to making a good salary, and then suddenly, oops, like they're not selling as many. That's not good, right? And so there was a lot of pressure on Kennedy because he was considered very handsome, very young, very stylish, right? If Kennedy wore a hat, maybe it would increase hat sales. And funny story, some of Kennedy's buddies, like his war buddies, they, after the war, started working in the hat business. And so he has friends who work in the hat business. He has advisors whose family members work in the hat business because there's a lot of money to be had in it. And so he's getting pressure from all sides. Wear a hat. Come on, Jack. Wear a hat. Come on, wear a hat. He's like, I don't like hats. It looks weird, right? Because he's known to not particularly like hats in general, right? And so finally he decided, okay, I'm going to have a contest. I'm going to have a contest between two companies, right, to see who can design a specific hat for my inauguration. So a New York company and a Connecticut company both had this sort of contest. Eventually, the Connecticut company won, and they designed the hat, right? And so everyone was like, oh, thank God. The Connecticut company ran some advertisements being like, Kennedy is wearing our hats, like, look how great our hats are. And then he actually didn't wear it during the most important part. Right? And the hat makers were very, very upset about this, right? And so a lot of times they like to blame him, like it's Kennedy's fault. Kennedy ruined everything. When really, if you look at statistics, hats had been in decline already, had already been in decline for several factors. Some people think the Depression helped lead to that, right, because they used to be expensive. It's the Depression, people can't eat, right, so let alone buy a hat. Also, there's some theories that soldiers after World War II were so sick of wearing things on their heads that hats, they were just not even hats. They were like, I spent too many years like wearing helmets, nothing on my head, I'm done, right? So, you know, there are different, and also just in general, the 50s and starting into the 60s, right, you start to see sort of cultural change of people wanting to break with old traditions as well. So, sort of a lot of reasons why. In addition, one more other theory of why hats went out of popularity is because I mentioned that a lot of the silk that they made the felt with came from France, right? What happened to France during World War II? Nothing good, right? And so they basically had issues producing the silk, and it started to be very, very expensive. And so the hats were still expensive, like even more expensive. So on top of it was less popular, people were sick of wearing hats, and it's more expensive, right? People were like, meh. Also in the 50s, people actually did start to make more money, but instead of buying things like clothes, they chose to spend their money on new things like automobiles, cars, right? Because the 50s is the rise of this. Everyone has their own house, their own piece of the American dream. So they chose to spend their money sort of on other material goods instead of their wardrobe. But all of these things are not exactly, maybe together it explains something, right? Oh, right. So this is Lyndon B. Johnson, who was the president after Kennedy. Okay? He, it cut off a little bit. So Lyndon B. Johnson, he didn't wear a hat at all during his inauguration. He didn't wear it in the car. He didn't wear it during his speech. Didn't wear one, period. Right? And so he was sworn in, he was president in 1963. So by that point, Kennedy kind of already started it. Definitely by Johnson's time, we were done wearing hats as a formal symbol during presidential inaugurations. Although, if you look here in the photo, there's sort of a mixture of hat wearers and non-hat wearers. Like there's this old man over here who's wearing what looks like a Homburg. Right? There seems to be a lot of Homburgs in this photo. You know, you have this young man who's not wearing one. This looks like an older gentleman as well, wearing what looks like a fedora. You have this fellow who's looking like, can almost be a top hat, I think. And then, you know, this kind of middle-aged gentleman over here with a gray felt hat. Then also you have this fellow with no hat. So you can see sort of that it's at this point, you know, mixed. Women, however, are still wearing their hats, right? Mostly, except for this lady, but mostly, because they don't want to get sick and die, because women are always smarter than men. All right.
My favorite one.
What? Yes, my favorite photo too. Oh, good. The fun part of the presentation, Bill Clinton. Okay, so Bill Clinton loved to go jogging. Did anyone know about that? That was his like hobby. And so hats, not only are they stylish, but like I said, also they're functional, right? If you wear a hat while running, that means sweat doesn't drip into your eyes. So he loved to wear a hat while jogging. He also loved to wear ludicrously short shorts, which is also my favorite thing. We should bring the 90s back, I'm telling you what.
You know about another, his father.
Oh yes, and he has other hobbies as well.
Do you mean to play saxophone?
Yes, to play the saxophone, yes, exactly. So he almost always wore a hat whilst on his jogs. His jogs annoyed the Secret Service to no end. Because he refused to jog around the White House grounds. He was like, no, I want to jog in Washington, D.C. with the public, outside where I can see things. And that way he thought it was great. It was a great opportunity to meet the public, to show that he was normal, etc. But the Secret Service, they had to run with him. Now, that shouldn't be a problem, right? Because he's kind of old, he can't be that fit, right? But the Secret Service members also have to carry full body armor and 2 different types of weapons. So they are also jogging around Washington, D.C. after Mr. Short Shorts here. And so they didn't quite enjoy that as much. All right. So more of him jogging. He almost always wore a baseball hat. Usually they were gifts. People noticed that he started to wear these hats whilst running, so people started to send him different hats for different organizations. Usually he wore something that was kind of patriotic some way, so related to some sort of organization, right? Like a veterans group or, I don't know, a firefighters group. But he would wear different hats. People would send them to him and he'd wear it while he went running. Okay. Again, so this one's his own hat, right? And his lovely security detail who looks less than pleased having to follow Bill Clinton around. And more. Okay, so there's him in the same security detail hat, so they did some hat swapping. Also sweaty because he was running, right? And this is a Smokey the Bear hat. Do we know who Smokey the Bear is? He's the spokesperson for American national parks. So he's this bear that tells you to clean up your trash when you visit public lands, and who tells you to be careful when you're camping so you don't set the woods on fire. In America, there's lots of advertisements with this bear, and he's like, only you can prevent fire or forest fires. And you're like, thanks, Smokey the Bear. And they're always very, very cheesy, right? And so there he is supporting the American Park Service by wearing a Smokey the Bear hat. Oh, good. Oh, yes. What lecture on American hats and politics would be complete without this one? Okay, so we all know this hat. We've seen this hat before. Yes? All right, who is this creature? President Donald Trump. Indeed. All right. So, and this is his slogan, right? So, this is his slogan, Make America Great Again. All right, so this is your very, 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 very typical American hat, right? Your very typical American baseball hat. This hat sort of resembles examples, if you look at it, a lot of veterans hats, so hats for former military, that's already, come on.
Come here.
Lots of hats for former American military men. They like to wear hats that say, you know, I'm a veteran of the Vietnam War, I'm a veteran of whatever, Korea War, right? And so they usually have a ribbon, sort of like this one. Also, in addition, this sort of type of hat is very popular amongst sort of blue-collar workers. When I looked at this hat, it immediately reminded me of the same hat that my grandfather owns in blue, with the ribbon, with the same kind of large part right here, and then small bill, right? And he worked for 50 years as an air conditioning repairman. So, which is about as blue-collar of a job as you can have. Do you know what blue-collar means? Yep.
Big one.
Yep. So they oftentimes, when they would have to go fix things or do something, they'd wear a hat like this with their company logo as part of their uniform. Right? So you can sort of in one hat have something that reminds most Americans about workers and the military, which if you're a Republican is exactly what you want. Because who votes Republican? Workers in the military usually. And really rich men. But, so that is essentially the idea here. And of course his slogan is emblazoned very, 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 very largely here, right? And it's a very deep color of red, so it catches attention. Okay. So I researched this hat more. My last presentation, he had not won America yet. He had not become president. And so I sort of just put it and was like, okay, we'll see what happens. Well, he won, so now I'm going to talk more about it. So he actually trademarked Make America Great Again in 2012. I was shocked too. So after Romney lost, he apparently was sitting in his office and thought, you know, we need to make America great again. He's like, oh, that's a great idea. And he got it, and he put in the he put in the paperwork to get it trademarked. Trademarked means, yep. So he did not get the trademark until July 2015, because it takes a long time for paperwork to get processed. Right? The hat was never really planned. What happened was he wanted some merchandise with his slogan on it. A bunch of different merchandisers or people who make shirts, hats, etc. Gave him samples of his product. He kind of picked up the hat and went, this looks good, we should do this, it's great. Right? So it sort of just happened. It wasn't planned to be a big symbol, but eventually it became the sign of supporting his campaign. Right? So what just went up, this will be fine, look, some tweaks, some good, it's good. Right? It became the symbol of his campaign because it was very big, vibrant, and noticeable. All right. So recently, he has started offering different colors and things. So he, right here, this is his St. Patrick's Day special. It came out right before St. Patrick's Day. These three, guess what holiday they're for? Easter. Yes, because what better way to celebrate the resurrection of Christ than with pastel hats? Right? So these are his Easter hat version. Anyone want to guess how much one of these hats will cost you? $10. Do I have any other guesses?
25.
$35. $5.
Like an auction.
$15. $50. $50. Yay! That's amazing. Great. All right. So these hats, the official ones are that expensive. I'm sure if you buy knockoff ones from China, they'll be cheaper, right? So, and speaking of knockoff ones from China, Donald Trump has signed so many hats that he is said to know by the texture of each hat whether or not it's his own hat or a Chinese one. So you can't fool the Don, right?
And are these hats still produced in America or China.
So he says, and I did look into research, and it looks like that they are still produced in America. The official ones are. So they're produced they were produced in Los Angeles, and then I think they moved to California company, started producing them. But yes, they are made in America still. So yeah. Also, these hats, if you want an official one, none of you can buy them. Not only because they're $50, which is ridiculously a lot, but also, I'm teasing by the way, also they are only sold to American citizens. Why? Why are they only sold to American citizens?
Because American citizens make America great again.
Yes, well, in theory, yes. And also because every time you buy one of these hats, even now, it's considered a contribution to his campaign. So it's considered a contribution to his campaign to be re-elected. So every time you buy a hat, you're actually supporting his re-election. And so only American citizens can donate to American president elections, in theory, right? Okay. All right. So our next hat is the straw boater hat. Straw boater hat. Have we ever seen a hat like this? Yes. They're very common. So why am I bringing this up? It's because it is the traditional convention hat of American politics. What are conventions? All right, so conventions, right? They're meetings where various people who want to become president, right? They talk about what they're going to do, etc. Normally, it's within one party. So you have a Republican convention, you have a Democratic convention. All of the different candidates will talk about why they should get the nomination for a Democrat or a Republican. Yeah. All right, so it's open to the public, so a lot of people will show up. And before, right, it's outside. It's usually in summer. It's usually hot, so people tended to wear this hat, straw. It's not very warm, right? It lets air go in and out, and it covers your face so you don't get sunburned, right? So people sort of loved this tradition of these hats and started to decorate them, right? And so even in the earlier days, they would decorate their hats. Nowadays, these are photos from the most recent convention. People really have gotten into decorating their hats as a visual, strong show of support for whatever candidate they support, right? So if you can see this is a hat that looks sort of like a fortress. It's got Donald Trump, and he's holding some ladders. And it says, Trump's wall, Latins keep out. So this is Trump building his famous wall, so you Latins, Latin Americans, need to stay out.
Did he finish to build it?
What?
Did he finish to build it?
In this hat, no. So we'll see.
Because he started.
In the hat, yes. All right. So there's this woman who is clearly a Trump supporter. Yay. All right. We have a woman who is clearly a Clinton supporter, right? So she took a cowboy hat. Cowboy hat is the hat for cowboys, right? So she took the cowboy hat. She put a bunch of rhinestones on it, made it very bright. Put, the colors of the American flag, and on the top, she attached a Hillary Clinton bobblehead. And so that is how she walked around. I'd hate to sit behind this woman if I was in the convention trying to listen, but... Oh, right, here's another good one. All right, can anyone guess what party this guy is supporting?
Yeah, the Greenpeace pie.
He's so happy.
So what is he wearing on his head?
An
An
elephant.
elephant. What is the elephant a symbol of?
Party
The
symbol.
Republican Party.
Yeah.
Yeah, so he is clearly supporting the Republican Party with his cheerful elephant hat, taking a cigar break. All right. Here we have some more convention attire, right? I'm going to guess the that this is probably the Republican convention for the Republicans. I'm gonna guess. I could be wrong. Right. So you have same thing, red, white, blue, and then you have everyone in matching cowboy hats, white cowboy hats. Okay, this woman has dabbled hers, but other than that, right, they're about the same. This fellow looks like he's wearing a camouflage hat. Right? Yes. Here's another hat that was worn at convention. Or here's another hat that a delegate wore. A delegate wore to introduce someone for a convention. So he was supporting Clinton and Gore. Wisconsin's most famous product is cheese. So when he was introducing Bill Clinton in Wisconsin, he wore this hat to introduce a candidate. Right? So there you are. Right? So the convention hats essentially are a very fun, creative way to show that you are supporting some sort of candidate, right? That you are all on a team, right? So as you can see, hats have had a large role in American politics, both functionally and also in practice, right? We use it as symbols. Abraham Lincoln, everyone thinks of beard hat immediately, right? When we think of Trump, I also think of his Make America Great hat, right? We use hats to show parts of our personality, like Ike with his strong gangster-esque hat, right? Hats can symbolize the interest of corporations, the interest of vested interests of businesses, right? As we saw with Kennedy and the competition to design his hat and the pressure to wear a hat. Right? And then also hats are just a fun way to show your care and support for various political leaders. So there you have it. Are there any questions?
Yeah, I've got a question
Yes, ma'am.
about Lincoln. Did he really wear his stovepipe hat at the theater? Or it was a habit not to take the hat off?
He took it off. So, well, also he was in a presidential booth. So technically he was in his own private booth. So
he did take it off.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so he actually was like sitting down in the hat. They even say how far away it was sitting from him. You can look it up. It's a certain amount of inches when he was shot. So he did take it off, but it was always close to him because he did keep papers in it.
Thanks. And for whom did you vote? For Clinton or for Trump?
Who did I vote? I was in Russia. So I don't know. Yes.
Sierra, do you have a hat which you like, but you have not this in your collection?
A hat that I would like that I don't own. Every hat. I really, really want a Homburg hat. I've been looking for a good Homburg for a long time. That's sort of my next goal. Is a nice, maybe like a nice gray Homburg hat.
Hold on.
It's possible to buy it in London, but it is very expensive.
Yeah, most hats are very expensive.
Very, very expensive.
Yeah.
Are you collecting hats, yeah?
I do, yes, I do.
It's your hobby.
It is my hobby, yes. I have I think I have about 70. Most of them are at my house in the United States because I couldn't bring 70 hats to Russia, unfortunately. So I only brought sort of my favorites / the ones that travel well to Russia. Yeah.
Sierra, do you have sleep hat?
Like a night hat. No, I don't. That's that.
Why?
I don't know. I don't know. Although I recently acquired a Banya
You
hat.
need to buy it.
Yes. I do.
Did you buy some Russian hats for your collection?
I did. I bought a couple kind of military-esque hats. I bought one of these hats, except it's black with white, and it's your sailor hat. So I've got that, and I wear it a lot. I like it. I already have a Yushanka, but it's at home. I bought it the last time I was in Russia, so I don't know. I have a hat for the Russian Banya that I bought. So
With red stuff?
not with the red star, unfortunately. She said Russian, not Soviet. I kind of want one of the like middle-aged Russian man hat that's like black and kind of leather, and it's like a baseball hat, and like your fathers all wear it. You know what I'm talking about? Kind of want that. I think it would look good. Maybe, whatever. I could shop for hats all day long. So, any
asked the question, how many hats do you have?
Yeah.
Nobody
Yeah.
told them. Right.
Any more questions?
Thank you.
That's it. All right. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Feel free to.